The other thing about correlational variables is that in addition to direction of the relationship, that is positive or negative, and again, that does not mean good or bad. It simply means traveling together or traveling opposite one another. Hopefully you thought of a negative correlation. Now think about a positive correlation. This is probably a little bit easier to think of. But take two social variables and think about them and see if you can think of things that you would expect to go together versus move opposite one another. It's positive and negative. The other thing too is strong versus weak correlations. A strong correlation is one where the variables are extremely highly related to one another, such that you can predict the value of one from the other much better than if it was a weaker relationship between the two. So something like self-esteem and depression, they're related moderately to each other. So you might see a scatter plot like this, where the dots are kind of in this area, but it's not a perfect one-to-one correlation. The weaker the relationship, the more you start getting dots outside like this in no perfect way, but it starts getting wider and broader so that you can still clearly draw a line in a positive direction, but that there's more variability and you can't be as certain that someone's score on, say, the SAT is going to match their score on the GRE or their GPA as much as you might for some other variables where the correlation is stronger. So whether it is a positive or a negative correlation, the fact that the dots are not all on a perfect line reflects the variability and difference in the variables that we have in the social sciences, but it also reflects the strength of the relationship. So again, wider, more variation in the scatter plot will suggest a less reliable correlation, a weaker relationship between the variables, whereas a tighter group of variables, again, it won't be one-to-one perfect, but if it's a narrower group of points on the graph, will indicate a stronger correlation. Now, correlation coefficients, in particular the Pearson correlation coefficient, which we'll be learning about this semester, goes from positive, negative 1. Now, again, positive and negative does not mean like negative numbers. It just means the nature of the relationship. So there are two pieces of information here. This goes all the way down to 0. Okay, so the largest correlation you can get is a 1. The smallest correlation you can get is a 0. A 0 correlation means that your dots are all over the place and that there's no way that you can make any kind of prediction about one variable from the other. They're not related in any meaningful way, at least not linearly. So then your Pearson R would be 0, or very low, like 0.01 or 0.1 maybe. As you move closer to 1, the variables are more strongly correlated with one another. So a larger correlation might be a 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8. Researchers start getting excited even around 0.4, 0.5, but those are moderate correlations. But hopefully as you can see, the closer we get to a correlation of 1, which is perfect, again, we won't get that in psychology, but the closer we get, the stronger our relationship is between the two variables. I think the biggest correlation I've ever seen personally is a 0.98, and that was between what men and women want in a relationship partner. And that was an interesting study, but I'll tell you about that later. So one piece of information that a Pearson R gives you, the correlation coefficient, is the size of the relationship. So a 1, or something close to that, is a larger relationship. A 0.3, a 0.4, a moderate correlation, and then, you know, 0.1, 0.01, 0.05, 0, very, very small, non-existent relationship. So that's one piece of information, the magnitude or size of the relationship. The other one is the direction of the relationship, and that's reflected by the positive or negative sign. Usually, we don't put a plus. We just assume it's positive unless we put the negative. And that simply indicates what I was talking about before. Are the variables positively related to each other or inversely or negatively related to one another? So It doesn't mean that they have a good relationship or a bad relationship. It doesn't mean good or bad, negative, positive. It just means they're traveling together or they're not. And they can be doing that strongly or not at all, or weakly. Hopefully that clarifies correlations, and hopefully now you know the difference between a positive and a negative correlation and a strong and a weak correlation. And I will see you next time.